When it comes to platformers, you'd be hard-pressed to find a library as high in quality as you'll find on Nintendo systems. Even when it's not necessarily Nintendo helming the development of their properties, there aren't many missteps. Just look at Goodfeel, who developed Kirby's Epic Yarn and Yoshi's Woolly World, both memorable, adorable, and fun experiences to be sure. But do they manage a hat trick with their latest craft-based adventure, Yoshi's Crafted World? Let's take a look. In a similar fashion to Goodfeel's previous big games, Yoshi's Crafted World's most striking element is its aesthetic. As the title ever so subtly implies, the entire world is made from various crafting materials, including its inhabitants. Unlike Goodfeel's previous games, however, Yoshi's Crafted World doesn't just utilize wool and yarn, instead building its levels out of cardboard, cans, and string as well, while its characters are primarily made of felt. It's a different enough approach that the game doesn't simply feel like more of Yoshi's Woolly World, and the creativity on display is charming as well as surprisingly effective. The game offers up rickety docks and pirate ships, wild jungles filled with animals, and no joke, a spooky urban area where you're stalked by a serial killer, and even though these environments are so distinct, the overall style ties them together nicely. The visual style isn't the only striking part of Crafted World's presentation either. There are a number of cutscenes in the game that feature a slightly choppy, almost stop-motion effect on their animations, and I really enjoyed that. Otherwise, the game runs really smoothly and its animations are crisp as well as incredibly cute. I was less appreciative of the game's soundtrack, however. I can't say with certainty how many tracks were actually featured in the game, but for the most part every stage sounded the same to me. It wouldn't be such a problem if the tracks used were particularly good, but I genuinely found them off-putting with their off-key horns, accordions, and simple percussion. In short doses, the music is serviceable at best, but playing any longer than an hour had me muting the game. Which, hey, you know what? That might be fine, simply because the game is so digestible in short chunks. It presents you with worlds that last 2 or 3 levels more often than not, and generally speaking, these levels aren't super long. You could sit down for 30 minutes and clear 2 worlds easily, especially if you're not super invested in finding all of the collectibles. What's more, each of these levels tend to feature their own unique gimmicks, ranging from levels that require the use of magnets to assist in platforming and manipulating weights, to levels that rely heavily on doors that transport Yoshi between the fore and background. My only issue with the game throwing so many different gimmicks across its runtime is that none of them really get a chance to breathe. For instance, one level has you behind a screen for the most part, forcing you to rely on silhouettes to guide you, while another lets you pilot a Yoshi mech, and you never see either of these mechanics again. I feel like giving these mechanics a little more time in the spotlight would not only make the game a little longer, something that certainly wouldn't hurt, but it would give the developers time to use them in some more interesting ways, or even combine some of these features together. Beneath the gimmicks, the game is still pretty enjoyable, if a bit on the easy side. It follows the same formula as Yoshi games that came before. You eat enemies and turn them into projectiles, while platforming through levels using a flutter jump that gives you just a little bit of height and distance. There are a ton of collectibles to grab along the way, such as hearts, gold and red coins, and most importantly flowers, which unlock later worlds, and finding these is easily the most challenging aspect of the game. That isn't to say that finding these collectibles is hard, but finding hidden flowers can be a pain simply because the markers for them are a little finicky about becoming visible, even when you've moved directly over them. But more often than not, collecting this stuff is pretty straightforward, even when the game asks you to interact with elements in the fore or background, which is a neat little addition. The 2.5D elements in Yoshi's Crafted World are probably the biggest changes to the formula, allowing you to move along paths that extend between the foreground, midground, and background layers, as well as letting you throw projectiles at targets along planes that you aren't able to reach. The game also switches perspective pretty regularly, letting you see the level from the opposite side during specific challenges, as well as letting you play the entire level in reverse while you hunt for Poochie Pups against a timer, which basically doubles the game's replay value. If you're the kind of player who likes to squeeze every little bit of content out of a game, then Yoshi's Crafted World will keep you busy for a little while at least. The game offers plenty of unlockable costumes that are bought with gold at little gacha machines throughout the world, which not only change up Yoshi's looks, but also give him armor, making this already fairly easy game even less challenging. On top of that, there's the usual Nintendo endgame content that requires you to find a majority of the game's collectibles, and these unlockable levels are where the majority of the game's challenge lies. Unfortunately, by this point I was losing interest because the game's difficulty curve just didn't engage me. I didn't want to go scouring through its easy levels just to get the good stuff, you know? I suppose the last thing to talk about in the game are its bosses, which are fine. They make interesting use of the game's aesthetic and its 2.5D elements, but the only one I'd say is remotely challenging is its finale. Otherwise, Yoshi's Crafted World is a pretty enjoyable time that could stand to be a bit more challenging without relying solely on its collectibles. With that said, Yoshi's Crafted World is good. If not for its well-implemented visual style and the fun way the game plays with perspective in the different layers of each level, I'm not sure the game would have a lot to keep players like me engaged for too long. It introduces plenty of interesting gimmicks but doesn't expand on them before tossing them to the side, and the only real challenge to be found is in scouring the levels for collectibles, a process I only needed to do to access the endgame levels. All in all, it's a simple, fun time, and if that's all you want from Yoshi, you won't be disappointed.